What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And one of the other things I do is I host and co-produce monthly online conversations for fathers that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. And it's like Sunday afternoon, July 26th, a little bit after 5 p.m. Eastern time. And for those who are into a little bit of music, there's a pretty prominent artist named Stevie Wonder. And many years ago, he released an album called Hotter Than July. Well, let me tell you, at least in Toronto, it's been hotter than July. Like, I think over 20 days this month have been over like 30 degrees Celsius. And today outside right now, it's like 34 degrees Celsius and like 40 degrees Celsius, which if you don't know what that means, a hot. Let me just say a hot. But it is the last Sunday of the month. And before we went live today, I was thinking, we have our regular panel at the end of the month for Black Canada Talking. And I said, you know what? Not only are they the best, I'm thinking they're not only the best Black Canadian panel, they're one of the best damn panels anywhere. So you know what? You are blessed and highly favored to hear them share today. So let me say hello, and let's say hello to each one of them. First up, we have Elle Jones. How are you, Elle Jones?
I'm good. And it's a blessing to be here as always. Thank you for your loving and generous introduction. And it's exciting to be back with my brothers and comrades today. So,
Axel, always a pleasure. What's been going on since I saw you a month ago? What's been going on?
Oh, I think all is the same going on. Work, organize. We had a nice event yesterday, which was a bunch of the groups that have been protesting different things in the city coming together in one event. So it was like Palestinians, Hong Kong, Black Lives Matter, Uyghurs, like a lot, there's more groups than that. So a lot of people are just coming and standing together to show that we can show unity and that this is a global struggle. So that was a really nice event yesterday. And that's kind of what we've been up to. And then, of course, it's Moncada Day today, July 26th, the first blow struck in the Cuban Revolution, which have reverberated across the world and particularly across the African world. So people today are celebrating that freedom and its ongoing effects. So I've been doing that as well. I'm wearing my Che shirt, but you can't. Let's see if I can. There we go.
Got it. Yes. And we did find out you're learning a language.
Yes, I am learning Zulu. So I had my Zulu lesson today.
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to ask a question of all three of you when we get you all on. But next up, we have from Ottawa, Mr. Warren Clarke. What is up, Mr. Warren Clarke?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure being in the company of Elle Jones, Cesar, yourself, Dr. Vibe. I really appreciate it and this opportunity. But all is well. Thank you.
Good. And has your July been hot?
Oh, it's been extremely hot, but bearable. Just want to give a quick shout out to the Black Graduation Coach program that's launching in Ottawa, and it's not an Ottawa initiative; it's an Ontario initiative. So they're starting to embark on some really good work that we all need to support. Sorry, it was a little fly in front of me. In helping high school Black youth in high school graduate, but also seek pursue to the next level in post-secondary education. So really happy to be knowing the work they're doing and partnering with them. Also, some really good news with the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program.
Hey.
We're building our legacy or sustaining our legacy at Carleton University. So really good things are happening on that front, keeping me busy, and those who I'm working with, shout out to them because they're doing an amazing job and just, getting together and, brainstorming and, doing their thing. So big shout out to my whole team. So good job.
Well done and well said, and continue the positive momentum. As always, great to have you here. And Cesar Ndema-Moussa, how are you, sir? What's going on?
Hello, Brother Vibe. How you doing? How's everybody? Elle, Warren, look in the background, BIA Media, thanks for the love. Thanks for always being here, end of the month, but always another important day. I'm good. I'm okay. The ancestors blessed me with yet another day and standing for the cause of our people. Here, lots of things happening. We're talking about, coronavirus, but I've notably been addressing, and we're going to talk about, the importance of masks. And I know my brothers and sisters have been doing their part, but, I'm talking also about this other pandemic, actually two other pandemics that tend to be forgotten, but that are so linked: poverty and mental health. Besides that, things are going well in terms of the organization, Roots and Culture Canada. Salutations to my CEO, Ketia Peters, our CEO, doing her job. And what can I say in terms of moving forward? More education, more training, but truly addressing the very culture of white supremacy and white privilege. And for that, it's not just that minds are opening because of the current context, but the changes must be systemic, structural, institutional, and truthfully come from within, but also for our people. We need to address our people too, so that we empower ourselves to stand strong. That's why I'm here. That's why we are all here once again.
Excellent. Thank you so much to each one of you for taking time out of your positive productive schedules. I want to shout out already Sarah from Ottawa, who is a great supporter, and Double Mint Radio out of Scotland has chimed in.
Oh, wow.
So that
Hello,
is,
Scotland.
yeah, it's good stuff. Well, folks, I'll be I don't like this word transparent. I'll be open here. 10 minutes ago, we didn't know what we're going to be chatting about, but these wonderful, this family, like, I mean, they could have just got things together with their eyes closed. So we've got some epic topics to chat about tonight. And Elle had brought up one that I said, yeah, this is really good, about wearing a mask and being Black. Elle, kick it off.
Yes. So in many provinces, they're now passing mandatory mask laws. So it is mandatory to wear a mask on transit if you want to go into a grocery store in any public spaces. And I think this is both fraught and interesting for Black people, right? So on the one hand, we all understand that, you know, there's a social value in wearing a mask, that we're supposed to be protecting other people, and we have a responsibility to wear a mask. But what happens when you start criminalizing that or having fines or making it mandatory? So for example, if you don't have a mask and you can't get on transit, how are people living in poverty, or maybe homeless people who need transit that don't have access to masks, how are they supposed to travel, right? So if we're not giving people masks, and that's not going to be handed out at every transit station or every stop, and people don't have access, then we're now compounding the problems of poverty on people. So we're saying masks are mandatory, but we don't have any plan to actually provide people with masks, and not everybody can go out and just like buy a box of masks. Like, where are you supposed to get them? So first of all, we're not creating the access. And second of all, we know during COVID that policing, of course, came down extremely heavily on Black and brown people. There's all kinds of stories, of course, famously in Ottawa, and you Ottawa people can talk more about this than me, but of course that school trustee who attacked and threatened and harassed a young Black boy playing basketball and threatened to call the police on him in the name of, like, I'm keeping the community safe from COVID. And there's stories like that, you know, from all over the country, that we know that Black people were hyper-policed during COVID in the quarantine or, you know, shelter at home phase of this, right? When they were handing out tickets for being in parks or being on the street or being in groups. We know that Black people, just because of our race, but then also because of circumstances, like if you don't have your own home, so you're leaving the home because there's a conflict, you need to be outside, and then you're being policed, right? So we know that this policing falls heavily on Black people. So what's going to happen now with mandatory mask wearing? Black people are just going to be policed again, and it's another opportunity to criminalize and police Black people in public. And then the third thing I'll say before moving on is also being a Black man in particular, or a dark-skinned or a big Black man wearing a mask in public has, you know, never historically been something that's been acceptable. So how safe is it for Black men, for example, to be moving around masked, and that won't be seen as threatening in particular ways or lead to more surveillance because, oh no, now we don't know where Black people are going and they could be robbing things, right? So I think even as people are trying to be responsible and keeping people safe, this law, instead of being, you know, that we learn about masks, we educate, or we hand out masks, or we talk about safety and care together, when you make it mandatory and criminalize it, I can't help but know that it is going to fall upon Black people to be both punished by this and also surveyed in particular ways. And I fear, particularly for my Black brothers wearing masks in public, that are going to find all kinds of scrutiny based on that.
I agree.
I can't hear.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume that I can speak as a screen's on. Yeah, Elle, I thank you for that. I appreciate everything what you just mentioned. You know, this goes back to a conversation we had, I think, a couple of months now ago. We talked about white supremacy, and you know, when we talk about white supremacy, it doesn't fall into one institution, one line of it doesn't impact one community. It impacts everything we know. Everything we do is through whiteness. Everything that is in regards to how we're policed is through that white supremacist lens. And I think I'll echo more about black men because it happened today. It's actually what a coincidence you bring this up. I'm out in Montreal visiting family at the moment, and we went out to grab something to eat. The bunch of us, just keep our physical, social distance from everybody else. And I saw this kid licking the pole. Like he was licking, his little 5-year-old looked like he was 4 to 5 years old. He was licking this pole that we were in. I was close by, and my cousin looked at me. She was like, "That kid shouldn't be doing that, especially during COVID." And the heart that I have, regardless of you're black, Chinese, white, I don't care. If I see that maybe I can add some value to your life, I'm gonna, stop for a moment, maybe share a few words if I can, and then hopefully that resonates for that person and move on. And I had my mask on, and when I went over to explain to or speak to the father who was not paying attention to his kid at the moment, I said, "Hey, not to disturb you, not to get into your space." And as he looked at me, he jumped back 10 feet, literally. And I looked at him, and I had my mask on. I actually had my glasses, my shades on too. And I was like, no harm. I'm just letting you know your kid is licking a pole. So you're absolutely right. Black masculinity itself has been loathed. It's been the villain for many years. Now, couple that with black masculinity, with all those negative stereotypes, with wearing a mask and say shades like I did today, then that just amplifies my perceived villain identity as a black man. So we have to be very, very vigilant when it comes to this mask in black bodies or black people. What does that mean going forward? Are we safe? And if we're not, what does that mean? If we don't use the mask, and are we safe without using them? And the questions, it's daunting when you think about it, because it then extends to be like, well, if you're damned if you do and damned if you don't wear the mask, because you're already villainized as a black person, particularly black men, for just being black and male. And then now you have a black male wearing a mask. It just brings on a whole different sets of concerns or issues for black men, and not negating black women, but for black men wearing masks. So we have to be very, very aware of what these masks can do, and what they cannot do. And what we're seeing and what I've experienced so far, and I'm seeing it, not only in when I'm out and about in public, or if I'm watching the news, or I'm speaking to, a couple of friends of mine, or if I'm hosting an event online, it comes up. It comes up in these conversations where it's like, well, what do we do when we were in a mask and then we're in the public, and it could be very, as I'm reading one of the comments from Double Mint Radio here, he says he's been one person fined for not wearing a mask in Scotland. So it's not only in Canada; this is worldwide that we're experiencing. United States, that's been an issue. Canada, that's an issue. Now, as we're noticing Scotland, right? So we have to be very, very, we have to be very critical and very approach this situation with a way, and it's protecting ourselves. Does it mean now we can't go out at certain times? Does it mean now it's wise not to travel with a mask and sunglasses like I did today, right? So it's an important topic to be discussed, because then we have to ensure that we're giving the people who need this information, particularly young black men who may or may not know what we know. So we equip them with this information so they know how to navigate in the social world. Because at this point right now, how it's looking is like, oh, here's these young black men who are gangbangers, or black men, particularly like, for example, me today. Oh, I'm trying to help, but I'm perceived as a gangbanger. So it's really important of a conversation that we dive deeper in.
Go any further, I am back. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Cesar, please add in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vibe. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Al. I truly echo what my brother and my sister just said. I mean, when I had an interview, CBC or Radio Canada, among the things that I did mention on top of my brothers, when we talk about masks, we have to remember something. This is not another case of what some whites, but also some blacks, would like to claim as some type of racial paranoia to racialize every topic when in the reality of the fabrication of white supremacy is a constant vilification of anything black, and especially to look at a black man as a threat. And as such, what you end up having is really, amidst a pandemic, the very knowledge that some black men, but also women, have come to experience that anything and whatever you do as a black person will be first and foremost seen through a negative lens. And as such, the risk of a fine because you're not wearing a mask in order not to pose as a threat, or basically to not go without a mask so you don't seem like a threat because you're black, but to risk catching a disease. And when I'm saying that with a thought to those of our brothers and sisters who must work, who cannot do who can't work from home. Another important element that we must notably address when we're talking about the racialization of masks is the very fact of the very conflict that comes in terms of blackness to integrate society. The vast majority of black citizens are good citizens, to put it that way. But when we say that, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that we're having this conversation? This is the same society in terms of white supremacy that associate mask wearing as so many other things as a good or bad thing, depending on where you stand in terms of your social location, notably in terms of race. And as such, one of the things that come is that I'm going to show you a mask, one of the masks that I wear. This is an African mask made by my mother. Very bright colors and everything you want. Why must it be like that when we have to think of the fact that I personally have seen, such as at Canadian Tire, a white man in his 40s or 50s with a red bandana that if a black person like Warren or I were to wear them, a thought would be associated to maybe gang culture. Why is it that, as a black man of my size and one with his traditional wear and wearing shades to protect his eyes from the light, the fact that I wear a visibly African and bright colored mask becomes important for me to make others feel safe. So mask is not some paranoia topic. It's not some new topic. It's just another element added to, what we can talk. I think I read in the comments, Sarah Onyengo, masking while black. It basically becomes another topic that is addressed in terms of basically the very nature of the system in which we live in that also discriminates against, for example, Arabs when it comes to mask and Islam as a religion, but also the very fact of us as blacks as just another layer. If you saw one of my friends, Manal, because I'm actually here at her birthday, and she's been generous to let me borrow her room, but you might hear the kids crying, so I'm going to go back on mute. Just very quickly in French, c'est tout simplement ce que elle et Warren ont dit, est que le racisme par rapport au masque est du fait de non seulement une imposition financière pour des familles noires qui très souvent font face à des difficultés socio-économiques et donc l'importance de les rendre gratuits pour tous, mais tel disait également Warren, le fait de tout simplement être noir et de surcroît un homme noir amène une prévalence d'une pensée de menace et de danger. Et moi, j'ai rajouté le fait de la suprématie blanche qui, en nous racialisant tout simplement par le fait d'être noir, fait que, exemple, dans un magasin très populaire ici, Canadian Tire, je peux voir un homme blanc avec une sorte d'écharpe rouge, mais que moi, en tant que noir, si je porterais cela, ce serait associé au gangstérisme. Et donc, le défi de se protéger, mais risquer de passer comme un danger, ou ne pas se protéger par rapport à une maladie, une pandémie qui touche tout le monde.
All right, good start, folks. Have anyone, like, outside of the comments or the incident happened with Warren today, has anyone heard of any incidents of masking while black?
Yes, I have. There's a politician in Illinois who was racially profiled, a local politician. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but you all may have heard about our brother physician in Miami who was actually even handcuffed by a white cop. Again, I always say it. It's not a matter of training, it's a matter of culture. Again, a black man physician with the surgical mask handcuffed by a white male cop. So these are two cases that I've heard of, but I've heard of other cases in terms of community level racial profiling as well.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I've read a fair number of articles about masking while black, and I guess it also rolls down to the economic factor too, that many Black Canadians and Blacks around the world are put on the front lines, whether justly or unjustly. And, buying a mask, it gets expensive because people are going to have to be doing this for a while. What are the economic impacts indirectly or directly in regards to this whole masking issue? And I guess on a wider scope on Black employment or Black unemployment? Who wants to jump in on that end?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Warren. I was just going to say that we know that Black women are overwhelmingly on the front lines of healthcare. And that goes long back into Canada's history of Black immigration, right? When Black women are first coming into this country, Caribbean nurses, right? In the 50s, that's the first, even before they open up immigration, they start letting in nurses on these special, licenses. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. And which is actually, just to sidebar a little, really interesting history, because of course you had to be not have a partner, and there's a lot of policing of Black women's sexuality around bringing in these women nurses. So we have this ongoing history where a lot of Black women in this country are involved in home care, wiping the bums in the nursing home, in the long-term care, which is where a lot of the infections were. Certainly in Nova Scotia, Northwood, which is where a lot of the Black seniors are, is a long-term care home. And the infections were, that was the worst infected place in the province. And of course, a lot of the workers are from North Preston. But then when people in North Preston got infected, the Premier blamed it not on, having frontline healthcare workers, but on everybody being reckless and selfish and partying in the community. And then said that, they were going to spread it to the rest of the province. So even though it was brought in by white snowbirds, that was fine, right? All the people returning from the States actually brought us COVID. And then when Black women who actually got infected bring it back to the community from their work in healthcare, the Premier acted like it was because we were partying. So we know that Black women are overwhelmingly in these kind of jobs. And then it's like janitor jobs, cleaning, that we see a lot of Black men in. Migrant workers, 3 migrant workers have died already. And we don't know the number of infections, and they're not even entitled to healthcare or benefits, and they can be deported out of the country. They're making them sign contracts saying if they get COVID, they won't sue their employer. So we have this whole wealth of migrant workers. And in Nova Scotia, most of those workers are Jamaican, but Black and brown people that are coming in with literally no rights at all. And what are you going to say to your employer? I need a mask, when they can deport you? If your employer doesn't like what you're doing, your papers are gone and you're on a plane back to Jamaica the next day, and people rely on that money for the whole year. So we know that we're in the most vulnerable and precarious positions as workers, the cleaners, the people dealing with body waste, the people running from home to home and doing home care, and they can't protect themselves. And in particular, the people that they've had to bring into this country because the agricultural industry can't run without them, yet are totally denying them healthcare status, any right to sue your employer. And so I mean, it just, again, amplifies the conditions that Black people live with all the time. Enslavement was the exploitation of Black labor, and our labor continues to be exploited from us. That it continues to be the condition of Blackness, that our labor is never honored and our bodies are never honored. And anti-Blackness is about devaluing our bodies, killing us, but extracting from us what can be extracted, including this work.
Warren, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Actually, Elle was mentioning a lot of things I was going to mention, but one thing that and I really appreciate what she just mentioned is the migrant workers. That's a huge topic that a lot of people don't even know about. So that's an oxymoron right there. There's a lot of people, as Elle mentioned, Jamaican, Bajan, I think Trinidadian, don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of, Black men, particularly come from those Caribbean islands, coming across to Canada, doing that hard, mundane labor and not being supported or given the health care they need, or the service or the equipment or mask they need, just to ensure they're not going to contract these diseases. And it's a very, very, slippery slope. One thing I'm noticing on the comments, and yes, I agree with you, Sarah. Yeah, ironically, there's a lot of Black businesses, creating masks for people, and particularly in the Black community. But I'll say to that's all in the function of helping up capitalism, and it's a white supremacist way of capitalism. How do we get those masks? How do we get masks? Let's not take away anything from the Black businesses, because we need to ensure that they're being supported and they're making the money they need to support themselves. However, how do we get masks to people who really need it? And I'll mention that earlier. Access to masks is what the issue is. But then again, here comes the oxymoron. When you give them these masks, then there's Black men, for example, me, for today, who are marked as, the villain, a more heightened sense of being the villain with this mask and sunglasses on. So we're faced with this like double-edged sword, which is not only taking away from how we're able to navigate the social world, but it's also a way we're adding value to this white supremacist culture through capitalism, which is only going to benefit those who can afford or and white body, the white able-bodied people, and those who are black and marginalized folks, those are the ones who are going to suffer. And when we talk about this whole COVID-19 and using the mask, we need to be we need to be vigilant in how we're going to provide people information on how they use these masks in safe spaces, because there's this idea that yeah, you have the mask on, the government's saying yeah, put on the mask, or your province is mandating the mask, or your municipality, whatever. But what's missing is how are these people navigating with that mask and how they're being portrayed when that mask is on. So again, I know I'm mentioning a lot what I mentioned, but earlier, but it's a really important topic that we do sit and discuss.
Cesar, I'm going to have you, if you had any last comments on this one, we're going to move ahead. Anything else you want to add on?
Allow me to go really, but I'm going to give like an answer in space. So let me start here. When we're talking about that, so Al pretty much started saying it about, how we have many of our sisters, mothers, aunties working in hospitals. At the same time, we have to be honest, as we see, for example, in Quebec, so many Black people helped in terms of tackling the pandemic, and yet in Quebec, they're not being recognized status. The government is stepping back on easing the path to citizenship or at least permanent residency. When you look at, for example, in France, where you have so many Black women helping to the caring of the senior citizens, there's still a denial of systemic racism. But even when you look at, for example, New Brunswick, where I believe the name of the city was Campbellton, I might be wrong, but in New Brunswick, a Black doctor of Congolese background, Dr. Nzola Mungumba, I believe that's his name. I apologize if I didn't say it right. But a Black doctor in New Brunswick being victim of racism because he's being considered, but he denies it, to be the person who will bring a second wave in terms of coronavirus on the island. So when we're able to see all of this, and we're able to also see the fact that on a socioeconomic scale, in terms of opportunities, in terms of fair employment, even just in terms of expectations, the very exploitation of Black bodies and the dismissal of our grievances, despite fact and studies and lived experiences, just makes it that, as I was saying earlier, the very topic of racialization of mass just adds a new layer to the evidence of white supremacy that we deal with every day. It's just, how can I put it? It's just something that's becoming even more in our language to address. And as such, I think it tackles so well into our next topic regarding Black communities development and notably socioeconomic and identity empowerment, because ultimately it will be up to us to uplift ourselves and as such to also be able to protect ourselves. Very quickly, très rapidement en français, la question portant sur l'aspect économique mais également identitaire par rapport au masque, où notamment elle a parlé du fait de l'exploitation des corps noirs, mais j'ai également rajouté le fait que ce soit au Québec, Nouveau-Brunswick, mais également en France, il y a une présence continue des personnes noires, notamment de femmes noires, dans le milieu médical, dans le milieu de la santé. Et pourtant, il y a une non-reconnaissance de leurs acquis et toujours un racisme prévalent par rapport au fait de toujours pointer vers le noir, surtout s'il y a un écho, une maladie, une transmission par une personne noire, alors qu'on ne voit pas de tel quand ça vient des non-noirs.
Fantastic, folks. Thanks. We are halfway through and we're flying, but we are going to keep it going and keep it going strong. Next conversation topic, and it has been a month since we've seen these wonderful faces on our screen, so there's been a lot that's gone down. But one of the things that did go down is back on July 7th. July 7th was deemed Blackout Day. To support economic power in the Black community, everyone was urged to not spend any money, and if they did, only on Black services and Black products. So let's ask, how strong are we doing, or how well are we doing in regards to buying Black? Who wants to start with this?
I'll start. I think some of us are conscious enough right now to say, you know what, it's time to start creating or encouraging money from one black hand to the next. And I think it's very it's amazing to see. However, we're still seeing moments where people are still black folk are still running to white owned businesses and supporting them. And it's not to say they shouldn't be supported by their communities. If they're giving an exceptional service, it doesn't matter necessarily the color in that sense. However, here comes the oxymoron, as I mentioned that we need to understand what supporting black businesses are. We can't just live in the moment of, okay, there's these huge protests going on. We're seeing it in the news. We're supporting it, and then as soon as I'm sorry to say this, but I'm going to say it. As soon as we see a Will Smith and a Jada Pinkett Smith, talking about entanglement and then we're distracted. Many of us get distracted to the next thing, and this should not be anti-black racism. The fight against anti-black racism shouldn't be like, oh, it's only in the moment. We should just go on to the next thing, because anti-black racism has not been going away, right? And a lot of people are confused on what that really means. So we need to understand what the purpose of supporting black businesses, but there's an onus on black business owners to actually support or to encourage black folk to support them as well. It's not, there's been many times where, and it's not every black business, there's a lot of black business that exploit the black community by either charging too high prices where in marginalized areas where black folks can't afford the food or the goods and services. So there's got to be that reciprocity, but also there's that strain, and I get it. Capitalism is a real B, right? There's that strain where it's like, well, we can't go down lower in our prices because we have to keep the lights on. We got to keep, and I get that, but we have to figure out ways of how we encourage our black community members to not only buy black, but to continue to support them where they can afford it, and they can be able to, not only afford it, but also spread word of mouth for that business, which doesn't happen too well. So it's we have to recognize there's two sides to the coin here in terms of how we can support. We think about Black Wall Street. It wasn't just about, okay, let's form a Black Wall Street and then fund them. No, there was that sense of reciprocity that was existing within that community where they knew they were getting exceptional service for the products or services they were buying. We need to encourage that with black business owners, but encourage black people to see the value in buying black, because we're only seeing the value in buying black when certain things erupt, and it's not continuing where, in my opinion, where I think it should be continued to support and continue that sense of buying black. So there's a twofold conversation we need to have on this. So I'm gonna stop there because I'm really willing to hear what others are going to say.
Elle?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think along with that is it really buying black if, for example, we're ordering a bunch of cheap T-shirts from Chinatown and then printing on them, we're still giving the money back to somebody else, right? So we're not buying black until the food that we're selling in our shop is produced in a black community on our own land. That's buying black, right? So I think we also have to really extend beyond a really narrow idea that, like if we're sewing a mask, is that material African material? Is it something that we've created, or did we buy it somewhere else and then we just got it from the fabric store, right? So that's a more complicated conversation. And I actually am going to go international with this. It is the 7th anniversary of the economic freedom fighters today. They've been existing for 7 years in South Africa. And if you take a look at their pillars, the number one pillar is land as economic empowerment. So until black people have our land and the mineral wealth under it and all the things that are under it, because of course, South Africa has diamond mines and platinum mines and gold mines, and the South African people, the 90% black South Africans, are not profiting from that. In fact, 86% of the land is owned by white people, including like the Beers Diamond Co-op, owning the diamond mines. Coltan is under the soil in Congo. We need that for our cell phones. So it doesn't matter if we're manufacturing. We're not even getting the money back from the minerals, never mind being able to manufacture things ourselves. So we also have to look at that. Where's the product coming from? Why don't we own our own lands, even in our own countries? Why don't we own the land and the food and everything like that? So buying black has to be a much broader conversation beyond us being the last chain in the manufacturing, because we've always been that. We always were the slave putting, the sugar into the mill to make the rum. But what we've never done is been able to get the full profits from that. I also cite Harriet Tubman here, and this is the last thing I'll say before we move on, because we had this debate with this week with Kanye West saying that Harriet Tubman didn't really free the slaves. And then we had this debate over people saying, well, yeah, because Harriet Tubman just freed the slaves to work for white people, which is a lie, because Harriet Tubman actually had an economic vision. Harriet Tubman actually built a cooperative laundry with Black women because she understood that Black people had to be able to share the wealth and work cooperatively. So when she got money from the government during the Civil War for serving as a nurse, she took that money and invested it and made a cooperative laundry, so all the Black women were washing clothes of soldiers and being able to profit from that. And she believed that nobody should have, hierarchical wealth. So she believed in this vision that Harriet had. It wasn't just that she was going back and pulling enslaved people out. She understood that we would have to have land and businesses. We have to empower ourselves in a collective way. And she had a very, very radical vision that people to this day still don't understand in the limited story we're told of her. So, this week we're having that discussion with people saying, oh, she just freed the slaves to work for white people. Like, you don't know your history. And you also don't know that these questions that we have now are very deep political questions that aren't about buying T-shirts and making T-shirts. They actually go to the fundamental roots of what is Black liberation. And I will tie that to Emancipation Day coming up on August 1st, but that question of, are Black people truly free yet? Are we emancipated? Has slavery ended when we continue to work low-wage jobs? When everything that we produce is taken from us, when we create all the new slang, all the new dances, everything that's cool, but yet the Black creators of that don't profit, when the white 15-year-olds on TikTok are multimillionaires and the Black girls that invented the dance have nothing and their names aren't even said. When, what's that game? I can't think of it now, with all the dances in it, Fortnite. When Fortnite is stealing Black dances and Black people can't even copyright them, and people paying millions and millions and millions of dollars to get those add-ons, and the Black creators don't even benefit. So our unfreedom has always been tied to our labor and the lack of value of that. And that is so tied to this idea of Black businesses. Until we can value our own work, have our own products, grow that food from our own land, and share it with each other in our own stores with Black employees, are we free?
Cesar.
I applaud my brother Warren. I applaud my sister Elle. They've really said it all. They've really answered it. Where I'm going to add a spin to it is the fact that talking about Black business, consuming Black, buying Black, all of such, is centered on the notion of identity. The notion of identity, which basically makes it that it is not a matter of buying Black because it's Buy Black Day or Blackout Day, or because it's Juneteenth, or because of any other event. That's the reason. It's about expressing your identity on a constant basis, on a daily and weekly basis. Too often in our Black community, we have people who will do so much to make sure that on social media they're seen at the fancy Italian restaurant, at the fancy wine and cheese of the white community, and yet they won't go support their own brothers and sisters who might be struggling and yet who are just 5 or 10 minutes down the street, while we see people of other communities. And I give the example of the Jewish community, where economic studies say it is a community in which the money circulates in the longest. And I often give the example that for us to really talk about Black businesses and the support, it's not simply a matter of saying to support just because they're Black, because we still have to address the matter of standard and quality. We must uplift one another. We must help one another. And as such, when we are here to talk in terms of a Blackout Day, to talk about identity, and as Elle did so well, talking about Harriet Tubman and making a connection in terms of land and the economic freedom fighters. Salutation to our brother, Julius Malema. One of the things that we must understand is that we must not fall victim to the open trap that is capitalism, or basically the lure of a paycheck, the lure of a little bit of money or a little bit of attention, a little bit of exposure. We must understand that at the end of the day, no matter how strong or rich one Black individual is, it means little to nothing if the community, the group as a whole, is not strong. I often give the example to brothers and sisters: do not be so proud that Jay-Z is a billionaire, or that this and other person as Oprah is a billionaire, if at the end of the day, the community is still perceived as weak socioeconomically, and as Elle said, in our very own African countries, but also Caribbean nations and Black communities worldwide. We don't own the land. The grocery stores are so too often owned by people of other communities. And at the same time, you end up seeing that we have a strong buying power when it comes to such things as entertainment and things that basically are not they're not productive in terms of making us strong, but at the end of the day, they enrich other communities. Très rapidement en français, la conversation qui porte dessus le fait d'acheter noir et de cet élément de conscientisation. Donc, c'est le fait de parler du fait que la richesse véritable de l'Afrique et des pays antillais, caribéens, le sol, le fait qu'on soit vraiment propriétaire de ce qui est nôtre, doit vraiment passer notamment par l'identité et par le fait que ce n'est pas une question de faire parce que c'est un jour ou c'est un événement, mais de prendre conscience de soi, de s'impliquer et de s'aider dans une autocritique qui doit être faite, pas une autoflagellation, une autocritique de pouvoir élever toute la communauté, car trop de personnes aiment s'afficher dans les restos italiens, les restos des autres communautés pour flâner sur les réseaux sociaux au lieu de supporter leurs frères et sœurs. Et toujours dans la qualité et des standards à remonter, bien sûr.
Excellent stuff as usual from our friends. They're just dropping knowledge bombs. Just going to catch up on some of the comments. We have E. Gabriel saying France is giving $9 billion in pay raises to healthcare workers, and yet they won't give Haiti their just due. Right? He says overdue. Sarah says ownership equals true emancipation. Again, E. Gabriel says the buying power of blacks results in spending $1 trillion yearly. Imagine if that stayed in our communities like the Jews and the Chinese and Niyi. I hope I get that. Niyai. Sorry if I get the pronunciation wrong. We need to uplift our own every day. I'm going to ask, before we move on to our final conversation topic, I was into a commentary the other day saying we should have something called a black tax. Everyone who's appropriated from our culture should be taxed. And one of the examples he used was Drake. He said Drake has appropriated from our culture, and people like Drake should be paying a black tax. So what are your thoughts on that, Panda friends? Should we have something called a black tax?
Well, let's start with Drake isn't black. That's an interesting thing.
Well, this is what the commentator was saying, not me. I just shout.
No, I mean that's interesting. But I mean, it is interesting in like, what do we mean by black? I mean, I'm mixed race, right? I consider myself black. I actually don't believe in biracial as a thing. We're black, like we would have been sold during slavery, right? Like as black people. But I mean, that raises the question of who is black? Who does own our culture? Is blackness American culture? So like, that's not actually our culture. Do we have a black Canadian culture? Is it appropriating? So sometimes people have accused Beyonce of appropriating because she's used like Jamaican culture, but is that belonging to all of us as black people? I know Rihanna, people were mad at her when she was using Jamaican dance hall because she's, Bayesian. So how tight does that go? But I mean, I would say that the tax is reparations. And I see that in the conversation about Haiti. So yes, there should be a black tax, but the tax that we're owed is from the centuries of our labor that is still ongoing. So, the cotton mills in Manchester that built that town up come from cotton made by us. And we are owed, we are owed for the entire so-called developed world that has and continues to take labor off our backs. So I know in Parliament, I think there's a petition that's going forward about reparations as well. The Caribbean has been working very hard on the issue of reparations and said that, we're going to make sure it goes to the poorest islands first. Haiti was mentioned where France extracted, $700 trillion, 80% of Haiti's GDP from, until 1947, because they freed themselves in the only successful slave revolution in the history of the world. We are owed that. That is not even a tax. That is, as they say, justice. But we know that black people are the only people not allowed to get justice. Andrew Malenge, who's the last of the Rivonia trialists that were arrested with Mandela, he just passed this week. And the BBC, of course, emphasized, he forgave his captors, as though that's the most important thing black people can do in our lifetime, and not that he fought for freedom, not that he put his life in line on the struggle for black people, and not that his jailers continue to walk around free and unmolested with more money than ever, while black people continue to be poor. So the question is not just, should there be a black tax, but why do black people never get justice? Why does everybody else, when they, and rightly so, we talk about like paintings taken from Jewish people in World War II, and they should get those paintings back from art galleries. But nobody ever talks about what we're owed back, and we're just supposed to forgive everybody. And if we bring it up, get over the past and why we're being selfish, right? So it goes to the deep idea that black people are not allowed to have freedom. We're not allowed to free ourselves. And we're not allowed to claim anything about ourselves, because everything we do that's good is public property and doesn't belong to us. And everything that's projected onto us that's bad is supposed to be that we're less human. So.
Warren?
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Al. And here comes the controversy to what we're talking about here. And Cesar was alluding to it, or he actually mentioned it, it's identity. The problem is, as Black people, we don't know ourselves. That's what the problem is. And because we don't know ourselves, we don't know how to free ourselves. We don't know how to come to a point of understanding of how we should move collectively. And it goes down to, how do you know your history? How do you know who you are? How do you know what part of Africa you're from? The thing is about this concept of Blackness, it's so complex. Not everybody subscribes to it, and for those who do, they have their own political understandings of it, which they perpetuate on other people at all times. So when you think about this black tax, who's going to actually gain this money from this black tax, and who's not? There's going to be a segregation in that as well. When we talk about Drake, for example, someone just mentioned Drake is Black. Is he Black? Is he not Black? What is Blackness? I think we have to understand that Blackness is a social construct that was given to us by white supremacy. That's what it is. And I'll give an example. When you talk about, we talk with people from, countries like Nigeria, for example, from people from Nigeria, sorry. The first thing they I've had conversations with many people from that, coming from Nigeria, first time in Canada, saying, what is this thing called Blackness? Why do you keep calling me Black? I don't get it. But we continue using it like it's empowering us. But we don't understand it's actually taking away our power because it wasn't constructed for us. So how are we going to now say, let's put a black tax on somebody where only certain people are going to benefit from it? It's not going to go to people who is good. I am predicting this. I'm not saying I have the facts around this, but I'm predicting it's not going to go to people who's going to need it. There's not going to go to certain Black people who are marginalized and who's going to need those funds. So we need to understand what Blackness is and what Blackness is not, and what Blackness does and what Blackness does not do for people. And when we continue using this concept of Blackness, it becomes very problematic, and it empowers some, and it takes away power from others. So I just want to mention that into the conversation.
Cesar.
Great question. Great topic. This is basically a topic which goes back to over 100 years ago at the very root of Pan-Africanism, such as the first Pan-Africanist International Congress of 1900 in London. Black is black. And I'm going to put it to you like this. Over 3,000 years ago, actually I should say over 4,000 years ago even, in ancient Egypt, in Kemet, Black pharaonic Egypt, they knew they were Black. They knew where the skin color made them different from their neighbors, Asiatic, today we call not only Arab, but also white. When we talk about the notion of a black tax, and Brother Warren, he continued what I was saying, it becomes a matter of identity. It becomes a matter of identity in which the very notion of us talking of Blackness is beyond a skin color. It's a matter of the mind. Because too many among our own people, it's not so much that they don't know themselves in terms of the roots, as if you're Caribbean / descendant of slavery, you don't know the country in Africa where you come from. It's a matter of, in terms of your affiliation, your allegiances. Who are you standing up for? And yet this is the Black community where we see too many, they will divide themselves in terms of Christianity and Islam, but you will never see basically non-Blacks as whites and Arabs go stand up for an African spirituality. It is the same basically Black community where too many divide themselves, not only in terms of country, but in Africa, you also see dividing themselves in terms of ethnicity. And just to go to the point of Brother Warren in terms of saying, for example, Nigerians and some Africans rejecting the notions of Black, well, I'm sorry to say, although, yes, we can talk in terms of white supremacy, but we have to first say in terms of Arab supremacy with Islam and later on with Christianity, bringing this notion of us as so-called inferior beings due to our skin color. The truth of the matter is this: in terms of relations of power, we become not only defined, but we also define ourselves in terms of who is the dominant group. Because at the end of the day, no matter the skin tone, whether we talk about Drake or we talk about someone like Wesley Snipes or Seal, who are darker skin, They are first and foremost seen as blacks, and as such, they will sooner or later be treated as such. Let us never forget the matter of Obama, even though he became president, referred to, excuse my language, as a nigger in newspaper in his own country, just as Oprah Winfrey, despite being a billionaire, being racially profiled in a jewelry store in Switzerland. As such, when we talk about a black tax, I am for it. I am for it. We contribute so much, but the problem is, are our people really ready for it? Are our people really ready for it when we can't even come together to really learn about Black history? We can't come together in terms of an African spirituality. When I gave my Black Lives Matter speech at the Ottawa June 5th protest, I talked about Wakanda. We need to basically address ourselves first, because the money, even if the money came, whether it's $1, whether it's $1 billion or $1 trillion, comes a matter of to whom it's going to go to, but also what are you going to do with that money? Where is your mindset going to be at? Too many of our Black people here basically define themselves in terms of, as Frantz Fanon was saying, doing everything and anything in terms of being accepted into white and Arabic, but as well Jewish and Asian spaces, as basically for them to integrate and to feel love. So yes, for the Black tax, but in order for the Black tax to occur, we must address Black identity from childhood to adult age. We must address it in terms of Black business, Black education, Black healthcare, Black entertainment. When we have situations that happen, such as Nick Cannon, but as well Kanye West, that occurs, first and foremost, they are seen through a racial prism, before a racial lens, before a lens of mental health or a lens of anti-Semitism. This must be addressed, notably in terms of accountability of ourselves towards our own, because these are power relations. When we take the Jewish example, let us never forget something. Zionism struggled to have Jews join the movement. The greatest thing that happened, and I'm really sorry to say this, for some people this may be controversial, but this is factual. The first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, clearly said the Holocaust was the best thing that happened to the Zionist movement, because it created a wake-up call to all Jews to join and to stand up for Israel and for the community, instead of always seeking to integrate Western nations such as France, Germany, England, the USA. So we need to do a racial consciousness effort in terms of ourselves, so that if not now, the next generation or generations to come can truly stand. And at the end of the day, even if we don't get any reparations money, that we build ourselves in saying no to others will come to appropriate from us, whether they be Chinese, Jews, Arabs, whites, whichever they are. De manière très courte, en français, j'ai juste parlé du fait que la notion d'une taxe noire ne peut se faire sans adresser l'identité noire, qui, pour que cela se produise, doit être que nous devons nous adresser nous-mêmes plutôt que de nous diviser par les religions abrahamiques venues des non-noirs, que ce soit au niveau des identités telles nationales, mais également ethniques, ou bien que ce soit au niveau de toutes sortes d'idéologies, et notamment de focuser sur non seulement l'éducation noire, le divertissement, le monde des affaires, la santé, etc., pour que vraiment nous puissions, dans des relations de force, être forts et nous tenir debout, tel que les Juifs l'ont fait par rapport à leur identité, et de se tenir debout comme un collectif, comme une communauté, comme une masse, qu'importe les différences de teint de peau, que ce soit Syl qui est noir foncé ou que ce soit Drake qui est métis.
Excellent. All three of you, fantastic. I'm going to just catch up on comments. Sarah mentioned France has been doing the exact same thing to its former African colonies. Apparently, Afrique literally keeps the French treasury afloat. Nai said, again, excuse me if I got it wrong, can we be paid for building America? What about Canada? And she also says, correct, Warren, where's all the money going that was donated to Black Lives Matter? That's a whole other conversation piece there. That's a show in itself. Sarah says, reparations money should go directly to improving housing, healthcare, and schooling for Black folks. Of course, the tenders should be given to Black suppliers. Accountability is paramount. I have a challenging situation here. So we were supposed to address another conversation topic, but if we do, we're going to go way past the top of the hour. So I'm going to leave it up to our panel here if they want to address the next one, or do they want to wait till the end of next month? So I'm leaving it in your hands, folks. What you say?
I'm at a birthday party. I'm good.
But you're being
opening because our kids are coming in and out of the room. You just don't see them because they're really 5 years old. I'm good. Yeah.
Elle?
Maybe we can do it quickly. I do have to eventually go on to a Moncada Day thing, but if we keep
Okay. How much time, Warren?
I don't know. They're like gonna text me or something.
So before we get a time count, Warren, what do you say about doing the last one?
I could probably go over 10, 20 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay, let's hold it to 10 minutes. Time, and I'm gonna be like we say in Toastmasters, I'm the time counter. All so right. we're gonna lay on the last conversation piece, and I know it's not enough time to do it justice, so we may have to cycle back. In light of individuals like John Lewis, who have left us, so rest in power, and a number of other individuals recently who are rest in power, where does the freedom rights struggle lie nationally and internationally? Who wants to start on that first?
Al, you should go ahead because you were talking of time.
Okay, well, so I'll take that first. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we see as these heroes pass is, on the one hand, so we look at Mandela, right, and obviously a great freedom fighter. But we also, I don't know, you've been talking about this through the chat. You know, South Africa is worse off in many ways now than it was under apartheid. White people own more wealth than ever before. Not a single mine or bank or anything was nationalized. De Clarke, in fact, is able to come to Parliament and sit there. And when people ask him to leave, they're told the presidents are allowed to be here, even though he's denied that apartheid was a crime against humanity. So did Mandela win the struggle when we thought, oh, Mandela walked out of prison and now they won? But South Africa isn't free. You know, John Lewis, obviously part of the great struggle, part of the great civil rights struggle, but part of the rise of Black Lives Matter that people forget. When Black Lives Matter is first rising in 2013-14, it's a generational struggle. And it's young people really looking to elders, and many of those elders that entered the Democratic Party establishment and, you know, did not continue fighting for freedom. And again, so why did the mass prison, the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration explode and continue to explode under Obama as well, right? We had a Black president, yet the wealth gap continued to increase. Black people continued to be incarcerated. Black people continue to be poor. Black home ownership set a 51-year low. Obama waged war on the African continent. And we can go on, and that's not Obama himself. It's that he continued to do what America has always done as the empire of America. And a lot of people, when Obama was elected, was saying, you know, this is a culmination of our struggle and our civil rights struggle. But in fact, we know it wasn't. And that's why Black people are on the streets today, because our struggle is not over. So clearly it's not over. So part of the problem of these struggles is we hit a point where we feel like we demanded these things. You know, these people are free, we got this. But we know that even as we're struggling, our struggle is being appropriated out from under us, right? And that's why I always say these moments are so dangerous that, you know, on the one hand, it's a good thing that we get, you know, thousands of people out to protest. That's a good thing. And, you know, that we're talking about these things and having these conversations. But we also know that so many times it's been a moment, and then after it, maybe we get a couple of extra grants or a couple extra positions, but the Black masses stay poor. And they stay, in many ways, poorer than they've ever been. So we get one or two more university positions or somebody on the board of the bank or whatever, but Black people stay where they are. So we know that it's not a freedom struggle until Black people are liberated, but we know so often our freedom struggles are co-opted by white capital, co-opted by, you know, they sell themselves out into the industry. We lose focus, we dissipate, we fight with each other and sell each other out, and there's conflict. So yeah, it's a very difficult question, right? That what is the role of these icons in our struggle? When we're admiring them, do we admire them in all their complexities, or do we create a kind of heroism where Mandela becomes a saint? But he wasn't. Chris Hani disagreed with Mandela. There were all kinds of, Dennis Brutus disagreed with Mandela in the direction he was taking the country. But we erase that dispute and then hold Mandela up as a saint. But you can't get freedom that way without continuing to dispute and debate and struggle. So we are in another moment where there's a lot of energy, but the fear is that that energy will get, you know, turned into these neoliberal enterprises and capitalism, one or two more positions, and we still won't find freedom, because we cannot find freedom until we engage in collective struggle, collective liberation, for all Black people, with all Black people, by all Black people.
Cesar, I'm going to have you go next.
What can I really say? First of all, respect and honor to Brother John Lewis, but also to so many others who don't get notably to be in the front page of news. When we were talking about masks, this is where the next struggle is going. But it's not just the next struggle. When we have to talk about, for example, the environment, African countries, Caribbean countries south of the hemisphere will be more affected. When we have to talk about where the freedom struggle for Black people will go. And L, I like what you said, continuing what I was saying. Me being a director in the government, me basically teaching equity, diversity, and inclusivity, and notably anti-Black racism to public servants and to senior leaders in institutions, it means nothing in my community is not being uplifted. And if I'm not doing my part to uplift it, an individual effort is very little if the community, the group itself, is still at the bottom. So the struggle in terms of Blackness is a struggle that now we have a movement, such as, for example, the fact that so many people are saying Black Lives Matter, including non-Black people. That does not mean to diminish the notion of Black power. It doesn't mean to diminish that. But what it means even more is to build on ourselves, to build on our identity, to build our communities, to build our nations. Because ultimately, it will never be about others. And some people talk about George Soros. Some people talk about voting for Joseph Biden. No, those are not the solutions. The solutions only come from us, by us. And yes, you get it, the FUBU logic, for us, by us. This is where I'd like to take a moment to give a shout out to my brother, illustrator, and his colleague, the writer of a book called Trailblazers about Blacks in Canadian history. This is where we uplift ourselves, when we appropriate the very narrative, the very language, and in our mind, we create a new discourse based on facts, based on documents, based on uplifting ourselves. Because I'm going to surprise you here, white supremacy will end. White supremacy started about 500 years ago, it will end. But for it to end and for our fate to change, it must come from us. It must come from us as individuals, from us as communities, from us as nations, and to stop pointless dividing that only serves to weaken ourselves and to strengthen others. And in that logic, one of the things that happen is simply the fact that for us to really move forward, and I really say this, there's no controversy about this. For us to really move forward, we must empower ourselves at all levels and stop backbiting, betrayal, desperate to integrate other communities, desperate to have some spotlight upon us. Très rapidement, où est la continuation de la lutte des Noirs? Comme je disais, les masques dans le contexte de coronavirus, de la pandémie, c'est un exemple. Mais aussi parler de l'environnement, tout comme également le fait d'adresser le fait que la liberté du combat des Noirs se fait tant au niveau individuel, mais aussi communautaire, et au niveau de nos nations, dans les Antilles, comme en Afrique. Et en ce sens, nous devons travailler sur nous-mêmes, car ce ne seront pas les autres qui nous donneront les avancements et les libertés, que ce soit que certains parlent d'un George Soros ou de voter pour Biden et ce genre de choses. Et ultimement, ce qui arrive est tout simplement que, autant qu'on peut dire Black Lives Matter, la vie des Noirs compte, on doit toujours continuer à dire Black Power, parce qu'en fait, c'est dans cette force que nous puiserons pour toujours se tenir debout et avoir plus des nôtres debout avec nous.
Warren, you're closing it out.
All right. So when we talk about where this freedom struggle is going to go, I like to start off with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. When we talk about those two people specifically, we many of us only know surface level information about what their fight was against and what they were willing to give up to get that struggle. And what I'm noticing a lot now with a lot of leaders is that it's a moment to get on TV. It's a moment to show that what the words I can use. The words, it's a moment for people to, many of us, not all of us, it's a moment to show that, hey, I am the leader. And that's where the problem is. One of the things that we can say for certain, Martin Luther King didn't even want to be the leader of the civil rights movement. He didn't. He actually turned it down. And he fit the role very well because he believed it from his heart, and he was a great leader in doing what he did. But he wasn't doing it for fame. There was no fame about what Martin Luther King was doing it. When we talk about John Lewis, there's a lot of people don't even know who John Lewis is. People are already saying R.I.P. to John Lewis now because a lot of people, that may have known and given that information to them, they're saying, okay, maybe I should hashtag John Lewis. But the point is like, if we don't know our history, if we don't know the certain characters that helped us pave the way for where we are now, how are we going to continue down this road of liberation and actually a sense of for sense of liberation among our Black communities. That's one of the problems here, is that we don't know our history enough to pave a future for those coming up behind us. We're doing things in a way where it's very individualistic, but not looking at the whole Black community in its entirety. So we need to be very understanding of what our history has done for us and what we can learn from our history to make sure that there's this true not only freedom but a liberation among Black communities.
All right, great finishing comment from another epic conversation. Just want to catch up on some comments here. Oliver said, sorry, great show. High time to be united and vigilant to liberate ourselves. Thank you. Also, Sarah says we must remain vigilant when it comes to our liberation struggle. And Sarah, yes, you have provided another conversation topic for a future conversation. That should be an entire show topic. Yes, it will be. Don't worry about that. So they did it in less than 10 minutes, folks. So they got 30, 45 seconds to say their goodbyes. So, Elle, what do you have coming up, and how can people get in contact with you?
People can, I'm also my Facebook friend limit. People can email me at el.jones@msvu.ca. That's a lot of letters. l.jones@msvu.ca. What's coming up? I don't know. There's always something that I can't even say anymore. But tonight you can watch Africa in the World Thanks Cuba. I think it's on Twitch. So you can watch that concert if you want to, and I'm part of that.
Excellent. Now, I'm waiting for the day, Elle, you're saying, I have room for Facebook friends. Warren and I are waiting for that day. Will it ever happen? Will it ever happen? Warren, how can people get in touch with you?
I've been trying to ask Elle to add me as a friend, but I just can't get past the barriers, the Facebook barriers. So Elle, please let us know when you're freed up some space. But needless to say, people can reach me at the best way is just visit my website, warrenclarke.ca. It has to be updated, which I'll get onto one of these days in the near future. But all my contact information is there. warrengclarke@gmail.com if you need to reach me. And yeah, so look out for the great things that are coming out of Ottawa. There's a lot of trailblazers in Ottawa. Sarah's one of them. Please check out the work she's doing and the advocacy work she's doing in the Black communities. Richard Sharp, shout out to him. He's doing some amazing work. Can't forget Cesar, obviously. He's from the Ottawa community as well. But there's a lot of folks, not only just Warren Clarke doing his thing. Also I want to give a shout out to Tanya Van Loo, who's doing anything in Montreal for the Black community there. So there's a lot of people. Okay, so please reach out to them. I'm not the only person that you can reach out to, plus I'm really busy. So reach out to other people too.
Well said. Cesar?
Thank you so much. Great show. Congrats to Elle. Congrats to Warren. Congrats to you, Dr. Vibe, and to BIA Media. Supporting one another. That's Pan-Africanism right there. And on that note, I'd really like to say, easy to reach, Facebook, Cesar Rimy, RIMY, and also Roots and Culture Canada. And if you're a public servant, talk to your bosses regarding having a training on equity, diversity, and inclusivity from us. We've had police, some police services of different cities that are reaching out because they're starting to understand that the conversations need to get real and no more on the surface. Very quickly, I'd just like to remind our people, support Assa Traoré in France. The sister is doing great work. She mobilized around 20,000 people on a protest in Paris for justice of her brother Adama and regarding anti-police brutality. At the same time, I'd like to say hello to my friends, Idriss Gabriel, Oliver Mwenake, who came to support the Dr. Vibe show. And I'd like to leave on this note, Trailblazers, the book by my brother, Cesar Ndema-Moussa, and writer Tiana Ridley Padmore regarding Blacks in Canadian history. And I'd like to leave you on one note. Our great leader, Bantu Steve Biko, said, the greatest weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. I repeat, the greatest weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. We don't have to be oppressed. Understand? Not as one, together in order to be strong. I love you, my brothers and sisters.
Wonderful last words. I'd like to shout out people who made this live an epic conversation. Sarah, Double Mint Radio out of Scotland. E. Gabriel, Niyi. I hope I get that name right. She'll tell me if I don't, I'm sure. And also, I have, of course, got to thank BIA Media. Oliver, thank you so much. And everyone who watches live on the replay, it's appreciated, not taken for granted. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way, just go to my website, thedrvibeshow.com. As always, I close out, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith and walk good. And next week, we are scheduled to have a conversation about Emancipation Day, but from a different lens. So catch us 5 p.m. next week, Sunday. God bless. Peace be well. Peace be well. Keep the faith. Bye, everybody.